Good morning, good afternoon, and good day. We would like to invite you to our live stream series. Today you have Lee Norris and myself, Dawna Manchuk. We are across the pond from each other. Lee, where would we find you today?
Yeah, I'm in the UK and I'm in Bristol, and it's nice and warm. It's nice and warm today. It's good.
Is it?
Yeah,
Excellent.
very warm.
And it is the same thing here. I am in Canada. I think we might have had a pause there for a second, but I am here in Canada in Winnipeg as well. Today we're going to start talking about a topic that isn't really new to us. The idea of trust is the foundation, but communication is the vehicle. But we're hoping we can have a slightly conversation around a different spin to it. Maybe instead of going clockwise, we'll go diagonal today in the conversation. And we're going to start off with our first question. How does trust and communication work together to build strong, accountable, and high-performing teams? What do you think, Lee?
Where to start?
Somewhere.
Well, let's start with trust. Let's start with what that means. What does it mean in a work environment? It means, I guess, that when you are sharing things, potentially sometimes sharing things about yourself with people, but also putting your trust in people to say, to kind of deliver on the things that they say, a bit like promises in a way, that they're fulfilled, and both sides feel somehow that they can give something of themselves and know that that other person isn't going to use it in a way that is inappropriate. That's what really builds trust, that when you can share something and you know that it isn't going to be used in a way that is at least not without any form of permission. Something like that is where I would say I would go with trust. And then the communication bit, to start it off and just get you thinking about it as well, is that we communicate in so many ways. So communication we can think of as having conversations, but we communicate so much of ourselves, not through words. We communicate with people through our body language, with the intonation of our voice. So when we're talking and we're conversing with people, whether that be in this way or via email or some other form, we are communicating a lot, and trust is communicated and trust is felt by people when the actions that come from things are beneficial, and they're done with warmth, and they feel a sense of security, I suppose, in what they're doing. So there's a safety in some of what I'm talking about. People feel safe with each other when there's a high level of trust and the communication is good. How about that for starters?
Yeah, actually, the thing that comes to my mind as I was listening to you was one of my favorite questions, is just asking someone like, how do I build trust with you? Because the definition you gave is not my definition of trust. Those things are very important, like which could be probably some of the reasons why I don't share tons with everybody, because that has been broken many times, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that space of, really, for me, trust is when I need someone there, when I say I need help, and does that person show up?
Yeah.
Because it's not something I go around and do very often. So I always think, like, whatever my definition of trust is, I don't assume that it's someone else's. So I pay attention to those things that you talked about, right? All those different things that come up. So, I am someone who has a lot of extroverted outward energy. And so, I sometimes look for that in other people because it's a sign, but I also understand that other people communicate differently than that. So they would not be as expressive in bringing that communication to the table. But for both people to understand that too much of it and too little of it doesn't generally help different people come together. Both people, I find for myself, I need to take it from trust and communication. I might need to bring it down just a bit. But I also need those other people sometimes to just bring it up just a bit. And for me, that's where that builds strong, accountable, and high-performing teams, because I can't always be the one saying, okay, I know I have a large amount of energy, and so I have to bring it down. I also need the other person to kind of bring I need the other person to bring it up a bit as well. Like that's what I look for in really long-term friendships and relationships at work.
Yeah.
Trust
And,
built around.
yeah, and you're really, as you always do, helping me to think this through, because we sometimes use some psychometrics in the work that we do.
Yes.
And one of them is about motivation. And trust comes up along the spectrum of something which we call it's a people orientation. It's a people orientation as well, but it's about trust. And some people are quicker to trust. Some people just naturally will trust, and other people have to see it as something that you have to earn a little bit. And I think that my reflection on that is that that's okay, and that's important, because people are built differently. Yes. And when we start to impose the expectations that we have on others, I trust you, so why can't you just trust me, type of thing, it's unreal. It's sort of unrealistic and a bit unfair, because everybody's different, their experiences are different. So maybe the reflection is that it shouldn't necessarily be an expectation, but it is something that you negotiate through and you work. And that's why communication is so important in building trust, because in your case, you're asking somebody to tell you something about themselves, to say, what do I need to do to really earn your trust? And that feels really powerful.
Yeah, it is. It's a big question, and it's definitely one of those ones that most people maybe don't have an answer for. I do, because of the work that we do, and I just identified it in myself a long time ago. But that ability to think about building trust is small things, and even being able to acknowledge, like, when you make a mistake. So anyone who knows me knows I appreciate my time being respected. And so I know for me that can be a real never noticed. And I'm way better now than I was a decade ago. So that's how I look at it all the time. I'm making improvements in trust and communication about it. But for me, it's that space of that awareness of myself. And I know when I go there, and I know the communication style I bring. And so it's that awareness level. It's not that we never go there where we might teeter-totter on trust and communication, because it does have an effect on the team's performance. I believe it does. But that space of sort of that awareness of it, and sort of saying, like, what can I choose to do when I'm there? And as we start to go through and think about trust and communication, a lot of the work that's done through heart math and being coherent, right? That ability to actually be able to see yourself when you're doing things from a trust and communication perspective that are not causing the team to perform well, and then having a reservoir of good coherence to actually be able to bring that to the table. So, want to move to the next question, or do you want to respond to that?
I want to move to the next question, but I also wanted to just say that coherence, as we talk about it, is around being coherent with your mind and your heart, and your emotions, and maybe even at one level a kind of a deeper sort of sense of being really centered and being really coherent is what we're talking about.
What's it like to be you, right? That whole thing of ontological coaching, and what does it like to be you? What's it like for other people to be around you? I mean, I try and think about that on a regular basis, because I like to think about what's it like to be around, what's it like to be around you? And if we have an awareness of what that could be like, how does that connect then to this concept of, trust is the foundation, but communication's the vehicle? Question 2. Is it true that when employees don't trust leadership, even the best laid plans fall flat? The world is flat, right? But no, it's
the world's flat.
Thoughts?
Wow. I think this is a really, really important question, because I think that for many people in organizations, it's the experience that they have on a day-to-day basis that is really important. It's not always the words that they hear. And I think this is one of the big conundrums, that the meaning can sometimes get lost and dissipate through organizations. So even if there's good intentions and in senior leadership, for example, it can fall a bit flat. And the challenge with that as well is that when you're delegating work, or you're delegating things, and you want, your desire is to kind of enable people to do things. If you don't get the trust bit right, you never really delegate it. People, if they don't really believe it, then I think people kind of walk away thinking, well, that was nice, but actually I'm just going to carry on doing what I was doing. But I'm also mindful, as I say, that leadership isn't just about senior people. Leadership is about all of us. It's about how we lead ourselves, how we honor ourselves, how we honor other people in that process of engagement and communicating with each other. So it's a big question, that. What about you? What's coming up for you?
It's to me, what comes up when these things arise in coaching conversations or group conversations is multifaceted. So one is, I believe we're all leaders. Mm-hmm. And so the concept of there being special training, I think we're all leaders in our lives and in our positions. And if we think about what influence we could have, and that relates to trust and communication.
Yeah.
For myself. The other thing about this question is, what would it take for the individual or an individual to be able to just accept the person for how they are? We're not assuming they're doing poor behaviors or bad things. We're just assuming that they do things differently, or maybe they've made a hiccup in something, and we're not letting them off the hook for years ago, right? Like, you've worked somewhere for many decades, and it's easy to have a crumble of things that have occurred over that time. And now that crumble, is quite big in your mind. And so when I think about when employees don't trust leadership, for me, it's about like, I almost reverse it and think, what does the employee, or what could the employee actually do to be able to accept that leader for who they are, the good choices they've made, and maybe some of the challenges that they brought to the situation. I mean, I always like to say I know how to stir the pot in a good way, but I also know when I stir the pot the wrong way on a team, which would cause someone maybe. So what could I do to actually just accept the people that are around me the way they are? And as a result of that, then how can we work towards the plan that ideally, hopefully it's a good plan. And if it's not, hopefully I can have a choice to share some thoughts with that.
Yeah. I also think that, well, I don't know if I think this or not. It's come to me as you were talking to me, but leadership is quite a personal thing. It's not the same as management, because management to me is about process.
Yeah.
Leadership is more about a personal journey, and it's a personal commitment that we make to ourselves and other people. And so this idea of trusting leadership is also about trusting people. And I think, listening to what you were saying there, some of what we are trying to achieve in our work is self-accountability, which would be having a great deal of trust in your own leadership. Mm-hmm. And I think when that gets separated and people start to see leading not in the way that you described it, but as somebody else's problem, and the narrative says that senior leaders and these leaders and whatever, but leadership is also about influence. Even people who are very senior lose their influence. So it's about something deeper than we might think. It is like a commitment, and it needs to be felt, and it needs to be believed. So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting line of thought that you got me to there, Dawna.
So if you take that idea that trust is a foundation, we often think it's the trust towards the other person, but it's the trust in yourself that you can do the work. Or when I've taken on large projects, most of my career, I've been fortunate enough that someone has either stepped up as a mentor, or I found someone as a mentor. It's having that person that you can kind of go to and just, trust in yourself that it's okay to have those resources, trust in yourself to take on the projects, trust in yourself to, and it's not always big projects. It can be trust in yourself that you can actually rewire your brain to live a life that's different, right? So if trust is the foundation, For myself, I'd say most of the trust has to come from trust in myself, and then that influences how then I communicate with others. So what level of trust do I have with myself and my belief that I can do things, rewire my brain, live life differently, or live life the way I am, for example? And then how do I communicate that to the right people in the right way, and maybe at the right time?
Yeah. I'm also thinking that trust comes from giving people the opportunity to learn for themselves and not rescuing. You know, if you want people to trust you, then to some extent it's not about giving advice or anything else. It's about giving them the space to really show up as who they are and sometimes make mistakes. And then when that happens, to be there for them. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting thought, right?
Yeah, it is an interesting thought.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought about about that. We'll pick that up on another time about risk and rescue. Risk and rescue. What can leaders do today to create cultures where people feel seen, heard, and aligned?
What do you reckon?
I actually think the person needs to know this about themselves first. I don't think it's something a leader can do unless the person knows. I know what I'm aligned with. Some days, you're like, but if you had to ask me about things that are really aligned for me, what I look for, what's important to me, I could give you a list that we could start to work from.
Yeah.
It's fluid. It's a fluid list, but there's some things in there that have been consistent over the decades of work. But there's others that are a little bit more fluid. So for me, it comes back to, do I know what some of this is so that I can then communicate it? And then the leader can start to know how to communicate. I can't expect my leader to know how to do all of this. I can hope that they can maybe be in tune to things and they can identify when I'm not feeling aligned, or they can see something and they're like, okay, I think there's something going on today, Dawna, but I'll leave it to you to let me know. That type of language leaves the control and influence with me and the accountability with me. But yet I can see that they know there's something going on.
Yeah.
I'm not interested maybe at that exact moment to explore it or talk about it because of many reasons.
Yeah.
That's
That's amazingly powerful, because sometimes I think we can feel like it's us, and then we kind of lean into that. So what have I done wrong? And actually the answer is nothing. And then if you fall into this idea that somehow you need to lean into that and then kind of explore it when the other person doesn't really want to, they're just kind of they're kind of doing their thing. I think that's a kind of acceptance and an acknowledgement. It's okay, we don't have to do anything, because we're people, we're human beings, we have emotions. And sometimes people, even if they're really not expressing their emotions in the way that we may think they should, in a sense, and I say that word deliberately because then I'm bringing in this concept of judgment. It doesn't mean to say that people are not filled with emotion, and kind of really engaged on the inside with things. And as you say, not everybody, sometimes we're just not kind of in a place where we might need to be at an optimal level of doing things, and it's easy to judge people, then, and leaders can often be judged, and it leads to a sort of separation and an expectation that is unrealistic. And with self accountability, this idea that why don't we, rather than judge people, as you were saying, kind of lean in with curiosity and say, I can see that something's happening, and that's fine, and we'll come back to it. So I'm kind of honoring you, really, rather than feeling obliged to judge or think that there's something that I need to do.
Step into that fixing space.
Yeah.
The thing that comes to my mind is what the leader can do to create this culture of where this might be. Was the idea for me was appreciation. So I appreciate that you made the time today to have this conversation with me. I appreciated the way, I appreciated that work you did. I appreciated that, I appreciate you I appreciate that you choose to work here.
Yeah.
And those are all things, but even the fact, I just appreciate the person that you are and the way you've chosen to work with me. I appreciate that you thought that this conversation was important enough for us to talk about.
Mm.
I
Mm.
I think there's, my when my son's friends come over, I do on purposely say to them, like, I'm really glad you came over today, and then I'll use their name. I'm glad you were here. I want them to realize that when they walk in, that feeling of a little bit of warmth,
Mm.
and I'm not going to go up and give my son's 14 kids hugs, right? But what else could I do to be able to express some of that thing that I'm happy they're here.
Mm.
And so
And,
what more
and a
language choices
communication, a connection. What you're doing is you're showing a connection.
Yeah.
That you're recognizing another human being.
Yes.
Which is hugely important, in the world today, just to acknowledge the fact that somebody's there.
Yes. Yeah.
You remind me of a friend of mine, and also me, who does quite a bit of coaching on the telephone.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll often say, if I'm coaching, you might hear me talking to somebody else, because whilst I'm coaching you here in this kind of telephone space, I'm also here, and I want to acknowledge the people around me, because they're friends and people that I know. So, it's just interesting that you can be in more than one place at the same time, and also be,
interesting.
recognizing that you can allow people to feel seen and heard. And
yeah. But you have to intentionally get up and get out of your spot to be able to do that, right? So, what does that look like in an office? What does that look like when you're working remote? Working in both for over the last number of decades, I really believe we can have great relationships remotely, or we can have great relationships in the office, and we can build this trust, and we can communicate, and we can make people feel seen, heard, and aligned to themselves, but also to the organization, right? The combination of the both.
Yeah, and I sometimes reflect on my, whole career, and I think whenever there was conflict in situations, it was very rarely that there was a real fundamental conflict on the ultimate goal of the organization. It was something else. It was something about, the word alignment is interesting, because it comes back to, and Mike and I talked about this in one of our other podcasts in the Insight series that we did about executive alignment. It's alignment to what? And if we expect people to be aligned to us and maybe the way that we do things, that may not be alignment in their mind. So it's a really interesting topic of conversation. And the other podcasts are there. We encourage people to go and have a look at some of our other work as well.
We do.
Yeah.
So I think that's a nice way to, as always, I've enjoyed their conversations around a topic that is not new in the workplace or the world. But it's one at this time that we just ask you to ponder how it's going for you. Where is that level of trust and alignment for yourself? How are we approaching this? And kind of, what could we do? Does that make sense? It's not even about, just even for us more at Change Innovators, we talk a lot about that ability to do self-reflection as our starting point. And from self-reflection and self-awareness, and that being, what's it like to be you? What's it like to be around you? And then from there to sort of ponder what those next steps are. Action right away is not that jumping off, but it's more that just be with yourself, as Lee likes to say, right? Be with yourself, be in the space, and then see where that takes you in this conversation. Any final thoughts, Lee?
Yeah, I think what I would say is, if we slow down a bit, it gets a bit easier as well. And I don't mean it slowing down with the busy life going along outside, but that slowing down with ourselves in order to be present with who we are. Yeah, exactly what you said. So practice slowing down.
Yeah, but it's interesting what triggers that could bring up for someone else. So we got a few interesting word choices from today that we can definitely bounce off of from here for other live streams. So thank you for joining us today if you're watching it live, and also thank you for watching it at other times. If you're interested in continuous conversation, you can find Lee and I on LinkedIn. You can reach out to us, and as always, you can find us at changeinnovators.com. Have a great day and evening. Ciao.
Bye.